Hello everybody, welcome back to Anglo Election Insights, where today I'm following up my Victorian Potential Pendulum video with one for New South Wales as promised. So what we're looking at here is the actual pendulum coming out of New South Wales's last state election in 2023, which a bit over 2 years ago now, from what I recall. So you can see here the Liberals are sitting on a slew of marginal seats, all of which are certainly under threat in the current environment, I would argue. Labor have a few of their own, but with only 6 seats sort of sitting in that under 5% margin, they're not really in serious danger of losing government at this current stage, I would argue. We'll have a quick look at some polling just out of interest. I'm not really going to make a big prediction in terms of who I think is forming government right now, but it's interesting to look at nonetheless. Resolve has shown that the coalition has been in front in terms of primary for quite some time. Surprisingly soft polling, I would say, but it does seem in the last print that that Labor's primary has been catching up a bit. If we go over to Demos AU, this state poll was taken a bit over a month out from the federal election, and just to sort of see what kind of sample they had, this 51-49 to the coalition obviously didn't end up panning out. Note that there was 6% undecided, and in the state poll there is 7%, so maybe it's that undecided component that really ended up sort of swinging things come election night. So just keep that in mind. But what we see here is Labor's primary down to 33%, but most of that's been soaked up by the Greens, according to this poll. Liberals slightly down, and you're getting a 4% lead to Labor on two-party preferred. But that's pretty well status quo, which would give the Liberals a good chance of holding on to a few of their marginals. And then the last Redbridge state poll from New South Wales that I'm aware of is this one, which credits Labor with a 0.5% lead on two-party preferred. Now, this is obviously pretty dated, and this is when Minns was just not polling all that well for whatever reason. What's interesting here is the Liberals, obviously doing quite well out in the country, but pretty high vote for others. New South Wales, unlike Victoria, has quite a few genuine independent MPs, particularly out in the country, so that might explain it. But Labor's still leading in the inner and middle suburbs, which I guess might indicate that the Liberals haven't sort of fully recovered in the North Shore area, although I'd be interested to see what the actual swings were compared to the previous election, just in terms of these regional groupings. Cool, so we'll head over to my potential pendulum, and here it is. So what I've done is similar to the Victorian video. I've gone through and tried to group seats by some sort of region. You might not agree with all my choices. I don't know New South Wales and Sydney quite as well as I do Victoria, but I've done my best. I know that, for example, something like Canterbury, I've put it in southern Sydney, but I know that it's kind of considered more of a western suburb, I guess, and separating the southwest of Sydney from between southern or western, it was a bit tricky. And seats like Kogarah and Cronulla are very sort of different in terms of their makeup and the way that they're moving, so it threw out some interesting results. But at the end of the day, looking at the pendulum, it did sort of moderate some of the trends, I suppose. It did show in the country less trend towards the Labor Party, but then in the inner city, and particularly sort of on the North Shore and on the northern beaches, a big trend towards Labor there. There have been some by-elections since the 2023 election, including in Epping, but I found that it's probably not very helpful to use the by-election margins in seats where one of the major parties didn't contest. So Hornsby, Epping, those kinds of seats. It's not really worth using the by-election results as I did in the Victorian one. So just keep that in mind. Also, I'm not as well versed in like New South Wales political history, so if in one of these seats like there's a swing in 2023 that maybe can be explained by some sort of controversial local issue or just something that happened that I'm clearly not aware of, just pop a note in the comments so that everyone watching and myself becomes aware of that. That would be helpful. All right, so we'll start with the Labor column. They're currently sitting on 45 seats, which is too short of a majority. Now, I have got a couple of sort of safer Liberal seats here, Hornsby, Lane Cove and Balmain. It seems that the Greens probably won't suffer the same effect that they did at the federal level, where the inner city vote sort of drops while it increases in the suburbs. Labor had a really big run at this seat with the retirement of the incumbent Green MP, but now the current sitting Green has incumbency, so I would expect the Greens probably to increase their margin a little bit there. Although with if the narrative is that Labor wants a majority and they're looking like maybe they can get one, that sort of could change things potentially. I know I was staying with some family friends in Inner West who vote in Balmain, and they're typical Green voters, and I remember last time at least one of them said that they wanted to see Labor win a majority, so they actually switched their vote. So then a couple of Upper Hunter and Tweed, a couple of Nat seats. I think Tweed, as long as Jeff Provost remains the member, the Nats should hold up there, but if he retires, that one could come under serious threat. A couple of seats here, very marginal. Goulburn just seems to have been slowly trending Labor for a long time. Miranda, big swing against the sitting Liberal there. And then Terrigal, we saw that Robertson had a big swing towards Labor at the federal level, so that one could be dicey. And despite the slightly bigger margin, I actually moved Drummoyne up because of the trend, but then I was reading that there was an issue with the local member and ICAC or something like that leading into the last election, so maybe that's sort of artificially close. And then obviously Ryde in that sort of North Shore area, which is certainly trending Labor. A very, very, very wafer thin margin there, so you'd have to have that one as the most likely pickup. Just heading down, with Gareth Ward in the news with his court case and all this stuff coming out, my assumption is that he's probably unlikely to be the MP either for very much longer or after the 2027 election. So I have Labor as favourite to pick that seat up. I know it's been Liberal held for several cycles, but that it seems that Gareth Ward had a really high personal vote, despite all the allegations against him coming into last time round, and he was still able to win as an independent, whereas the Liberal vote was pretty severely depressed. So I think Labor picks that one up. But then there's a couple of their own marginals. Camden in particular, there was a lot of talk at the time that One Nation effectively delivered this seat to Labor. So if One Nation and the Liberals have a sort of better functioning relationship going in, perhaps this is one that the Liberals could target. Penrith and East Hills, sort of perennially close seats, particularly East Hills, even in that 2011 landslide. I think the Liberals only just won it. And then Monaro as well. Maybe John Barilaro made that seat a little bit safer than it typically would have been, but obviously that's sort of a big target for the Nats. That'll be the main seat that they're looking to win, I would imagine. And then as we go down, these seats become really difficult for the coalition to win. Riverstone, trending away. The entrance potentially trending towards them, but then we saw the Central Coast area significantly move away from the Liberals federally. South Coast, this is just going off a cliff for them. Liverpool, Prospect, and then further down Cabramatta all swung towards the Liberals, and you can see a huge trend in both Liverpool and Cabramatta, but it's still like deep Labor territory. You couldn't really make the case that the Liberals are favourite in any of those seats. Although, looking at what happened federally, the swings in places like Wirral weren't amazing, and Daly holding her seat in Fowler suggests that Labor's not amazingly popular as they once were in these areas, but I don't think this current state opposition is in a position to actually make full use of that right now. And then we're just getting into some pretty safe Labor seats here. Cool, so we'll jump across to the Liberal column. Again, all just these safe Labor seats. We won't really worry about them. Ballina, this was traditionally a Nat seat. I think they held it pretty much from when it was created until 2015. The local member retired, and then the Greens have held it ever since. The Nats vote's just going nowhere in this seat, so I can't imagine the Greens either being knocked out of the count or the Nats kind of surging to like a 42-43% primary, which is what they'd need. Heathcote, moved significantly away, as we talked about some of these western seats. Then we've got some independents. So Wakehurst, from what I understand, that independent just kind of has his own popular brand of like local government politics. That's where he comes from, and he's not really like a teal or anything. So I imagine, there would be quite a lot of bipartisan support for him, and he could use incumbency to his advantage. I would have thought the Liberals would find it really hard to pick that seat off, but if you live there or something and you've got a bit of a scoop, just let me know if that's a bit of a dodgy take. Then over in Pittwater, this was the by-election that the Liberals lost to a teal candidate. The margin is possibly artificially high for the teal just because of the way the Liberal member went out with all those really awful allegations against him. So in the right environment, the Liberals might target that and do quite a bit better than they did in the by-election, but it's a pretty big margin. And we saw federally that unlike in Melbourne, there were actually small swings to all the sitting teals. Again, very similar sort of what we're talking about with the Labor column. I've got Kiama down here at seat 41, not because I think the Liberals are all that likely to win it, but just because Kiama was a Liberal seat for a while. I think a lot of that was tied up in Gareth Ward's popular, like his own sort of personal popularity. So I don't think a generic Liberal wins that against either Ward himself, even despite all these allegations, or a Labor candidate. Wollondilly, I don't. If I'm butchering pronunciations, please just let me know. I'm not sure the exact nature of the independent here. I've heard she's a teal, but then I think I also heard that she didn't really like the label. So it's an interesting sort of part of New South Wales for that kind of independent to sit. It's at that kind of, it's like a sort of peri-urban type seat from what I understand. Interestingly, at the federal level, Hume did swing towards the Liberals. It sits on a pretty tight margin, so despite incumbency, I do suspect the Liberals would target this seat pretty hard, but just with the history of independence and the sort of current trajectory that independents are going on in their parliament, I can't imagine that this seat goes. Then we've got those 4 marginal Labor seats, all of which they would target, but they'd need to be in a pretty good position to take even one of them, let alone all 4. But it does sort of show you that, the Liberals are potentially in the hunt to get sort of 40-41 seats, which would push Labor down to 40-41 seats as well. And given, the makeup of the crossbench with those 3 far western independents, you could possibly see, I actually don't know who would actually form government in that case. It would be pretty messy indeed. But again, that's talking about a scenario that is pretty bullish for the Liberals. Whereas, if you want my actual prediction, I would say that at this stage, an election held tomorrow would see Minns actually win a majority. And then, just like what we went through with the Labor column, we've got some of these marginal Liberal seats. It wouldn't be like outside the realm of possibility to see the coalition drop to like under 30 seats, I would argue. These are all under genuine threat. I don't know how many of the independents from that sort of Northern Beaches, North Shore area will go again, but I've got Willoughby there, Manly as well, you can see, and even North Shore. Speaking of the crossbench, as we go to the Greens, they should comfortably hold those first two, and I suspect they'll get at least a small swing towards them in Balmain. But apart from that, I don't really know of any other targets they have. Since Janelle Saffin got that big swing towards her in Lismore, that's pretty much locked the Greens out there. And, Summer Hill kind of looms as like their next target, but the Labor currently have like 50% primary going back to 2023, although I think that's the seat of Joe Halen, the one with like the chauffeur ministerial car drama in the Hunter Valley, whatever. So maybe that, like, she retires or something and that becomes a bit of a flashpoint, but at the end of the day, it's a big margin. And as for independents, just going up here, like, none of these independents, unless they retire, of course, they're in for life, basically. I think I've literally just ordered them by margin because Pittwater probably should be inside Wakehurst. Obviously, these two, Wallandilly. Kiama is the one that I think will become a major party seat. And then we've got these kind of Tealy type North Shore, Eastern Suburb, Northern Beaches seats, which the Teals ran against the Liberals, but there was some retirements and that sort of thing, which perhaps made the margins a bit closer than they would otherwise be. And we didn't see, there were small swings towards the Teals federally, but nothing that you would, like, in the history of independents and sophomore swings, like, often they just go off a cliff, but that really didn't happen this time. So unless really strong new candidates appear, I wouldn't expect any of these 4 seats to fall, but you guys might be a bit closer to the ground up there, and you might be hearing stuff. I had a look at like the websites and social medias of the candidates that ran last time, and I didn't see anything that really suggested that they were going to go again. I think 1 or 2 of them actually ran for council, and that's where they are now. Cool, so that's kind of where we're at for New South Wales. At some point I'll figure out how to do the coding to get like a map view on the Yap Maps thing, so that we can actually see it a little bit more visually. But for now, hopefully this has given you an idea of where I'm at. Again, please let me know if you've got your own thoughts or like a local scoop or just something that would help with mine and everyone else's understanding, because I'm not as familiar with New South Wales politics, particularly the history of it. So yeah, just let me know if I've missed something. But other than that, thanks for watching, guys, and enjoy the rest of your day. Cheers.